Welcome to Automotive Systems. Here's the plan. I'm going to show you a little bit of video on this car, all the parts and some of the systems. And then you're going to go out to your driveway or your garage to your car, and you're going to see if you can find a few of these. And when you're done, you're going to go on to Google Chat and send a few pictures my way. Let's have a look at the parts. So we're going to start in the cab. The first thing we're going to look at is having to do with the steering system. And you can see that we have a steering wheel here. That makes sense with the steering system. A shaft runs all the way down to something we're going to call a rack and pinion. We'll talk about after we're underneath the car. We've got several pedals here. This is a clutch pedal. That's part of the driveline system. A brake pedal, part of the brake system, and an accelerator pedal, part of the driveline system. Now we'll come out here and look at the wheel. You can see we've got this rubber tire. That's part of the suspension system, but also part of the steering system and many more things. Part of the brake system sits behind here, and this is the brake caliper. And behind here, if you look in this little window right here all the way around, that is called a rotor. That's your brake rotor. It's part of the braking system. And obviously we have this wheel here. That's part of the steering and part of the suspension system. Now we're going to pop the hood and we're going to look underneath the hood. There's several things we can see here. This is the engine. It's a 4-stroke engine. We're going to learn about that next week. It's pretty fantastic. Having to do with the 4-stroke engine, this is the powertrain. This is the air cleaner. And then we have the cooling of the engine. That's called the cooling system. It's part of the powertrain system, where this would be the radiator. It sits right underneath here. And we have an overflow tank, and we have some upper rad hoses, and there's usually a lower rad hose down buried in here somewhere. Similar to that, we also have an electrical system, a starting and charging system. Right underneath this cover is a battery. And then right underneath this cover is a fuse box for protecting all of your circuits. And then if we look down over in this area right here, you should see some pulleys and a belt. That's a serpentine belt, and it goes all the way around different pulleys from the crankshaft on the engine. And it turns the alternator, and the alternator charges the battery when the engine is running, and the battery is used to do all the electrical stuff when the engine is not running. Good. Some other things we want to look at having to do with the braking system. This is a master cylinder. It holds fluid in its hydraulic system. Behind the master cylinder is the vacuum booster. It's a round thing that the master cylinder is attached to. And then you should, out of the master cylinder, see a whole bunch of lines coming out. Those are your brake lines. Now we're going to look at the back of the system. Basically, we've got lights here. And there's lights underneath here too. Those lights we're going to talk about when we do an inspection of our vehicle. And from the back of the vehicle, we're going to lift it up. And there's a few things that you can take notice of here. You can see this round part at the back here. That is where the spare tire sits in the trunk. So it just sits down in there. It's a little recess. Then we've got something called a tailpipe. It comes out the back, and that's part of the powertrain system. And so is this muffler. And so we've got the muffler and the tailpipe. We also have part of the suspension system in the back, which includes the tires like we talked about, these coil springs right in here, one on either side. And then we have these shocks. The coil springs make it so you don't feel every bump, and the shocks make it so that the springs don't keep bouncing a long, long time. Let's move a little further underneath the vehicle. The exhaust starts at the engine, way at the front of the vehicle, comes through this thing called a resonator, through this exhaust pipe, comes up through the muffler, and out the tailpipe. Okay, as we move towards the front of the vehicle, you're going to see a piece right here, and it scoots around and is buried way back up in there. That's the fuel tank. The fuel tank is tucked up inside of there, and then out of the fuel tank comes this tube, and that tube goes up and over to where you put fuel in on the outside through that little door. So we're going to scoot ahead quite a ways, and we've got, you can see our exhaust here. We talked about it before. The engine sits right up in this area, and so the exhaust comes out of the engine and travels up all the way to the back of the vehicle. There's a few other things I want to point out here. Attached to the engine is something called a transaxle in this car. Out of my transaxle, there's a shaft that runs over here, right to this shaft, and it's got a boot on it, and it goes out to the front wheels, and we've got another one comes out this way to this little boot right here, and it goes out to that wheel. And those shafts are attached to the wheel to make the wheel drive. So this is a front wheel drive vehicle, and the front wheels pull the vehicle along. A few other things you might want to look at here. This is called the tie rod end, and that tie rod end goes up here. Another tie rod end heads up over here. It attaches to the rack and pinion system, and your steering wheel rod comes down here, and as it turns, it pushes the rack and pinion this way or that way. Well, those are some of the parts and the systems of the car. What you're going to do now is you're going to use the paper printed off that came with this video link, and you're going to go out into your driveway or into your garage to the car that you have there, and you're going to see if you can find a few of those parts. I want to know if you did this. We're not getting marked or anything. I'm just curious what kind of cars you're looking at and what are the things that you found. So for every part that you see on that list, I want you to take a picture and send it to me on Google Chat. Awesome. I hope to see you later.